There was a time when I didn't question much. Life had a rhythm, predictable, steady. I went to work, came home, and tried to make the most of the hours I had left. But somewhere along the way, I made a mistake. I assumed that the silence between us was just a phase. I assumed that the small lies, the quiet shifts in behavior, were just things that happened in long marriages. I never thought it would lead to this. The first crack, I think, was when I started noticing the patterns. She'd leave her phone unattended, which was unusual. Rachel had always been meticulous about her privacy, so when I found it lying on the couch, face up, I didn't think much of it. But it wasn't the phone that got me. It was the message that flashed across the screen when I picked it up. I can't wait for tonight. He won't suspect a thing. You and I, like we always are. I didn't know what to make of it. I was still unsure of myself when it came to confronting Rachel, and I brushed it off. I told myself, it's just a harmless message. Maybe a joke. I left it at that. But the thing about small doubts is they have a way of turning into bigger ones. Days passed, and the messages grew more frequent. Each time Rachel stepped away from her phone, I found myself stealing a glance at it, checking for more signs. And they were there. Subtle things. Like how her tone changed when I asked her who she was texting. Like how she started closing the door to her office more often, even when she wasn't working. Like how, when we'd talk, she seemed to be somewhere else. Her mind, always distant. I wasn't a fool. I could feel the distance between us growing, but I wasn't sure how to explain it. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was the stress at work. Maybe we were both just getting older, the excitement of early years fading into routine. I thought, it'll pass. It's just a rough patch. But deep down, I knew. I just couldn't admit it. Then came the letter. It wasn't even an elaborate discovery. I wasn't snooping, not really. It was just one of those random moments where something unexplainable happens. I found it one afternoon when I was doing the usual, sorting through the pile of papers on the kitchen counter. There, tucked inside a bill from the cleaners, was a letter. The envelope had no return address, no name on the front. Just a single line of script. For Rachel, when you're ready. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but I opened it without thinking. The words inside were calm, collected. But the more I read, the more I felt something that pulled at me like a sinking stone. It was from a man, and it wasn't just a love letter. It was a confession, an admission, a declaration that made my skin crawl. I've been waiting for this moment, Rachel. I know things haven't been easy. He doesn't suspect a thing, does he? That's the beauty of it. You're so good at hiding the truth, but you're getting better at lying to him, and that's all that matters. I promise, after tonight, everything will be different. He'll never know. We'll be free. I reread it several times, as if the words would change or rearrange themselves into something less real. But no, there they were, plain as day. My wife, Rachel, was having an affair. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She was planning it, writing letters, making sure the lies she'd been telling me were rehearsed so well, I never stood a chance. The letter ended with a chilling line. Don't worry, Rachel. You'll never have to choose. He'll never find out about us. That was the moment everything shattered. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I was in shock. The reality of it hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to do with the knowledge I had. I didn't know if I should be angry or sad or relieved. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd been blind. For years, I'd lived in a bubble, trusting, believing, hoping. And now I was staring at a cold truth that had been right in front of me the entire time. What struck me the hardest was the betrayal. The sheer audacity of it. I had been living in the same house with someone who was playing me for a fool, who was lying to my face every single day. But what hurt more was realizing how well I had played the fool. I had trusted her. I had trusted every word she said, every smile, every kiss. I had convinced myself that nothing would ever change. But it had. It wasn't until much later that I understood the full scope of it. That letter, it was just the beginning. It wasn't meant for me. Rachel had no idea that I had found it. But there it was, a cruel piece of evidence that confirmed all the doubts I had buried deep inside. And now, I had a choice to make. Would I confront her? Would I expose everything? Or would I let the lies keep building, one after the other, until they consumed everything I knew? I didn't confront her that day. I couldn't. I wasn't ready for the storm that was brewing, for the confrontation that would rip through everything I thought I knew. Instead, I let the silence linger, letting my mind replay the words from the letter over and over again. It was as though every little thing she had ever said or done had a new meaning now. Every glance, every casual smile, seemed like a carefully constructed performance. I wondered how long she had been lying to me, how much of our life together had been a carefully crafted illusion. The next few days were strange. I went through the motions, work, dinner, the kids' school activities, like everything was normal. But in the back of my mind, I kept asking myself the same question. How did I not see it? I watched Rachel closely. Every movement, every word, felt loaded with something I hadn't noticed before. But at the same time, I was paralyzed by fear. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? Was I ready to confront the woman I'd built a life with? To shatter the illusion of the happy marriage I had always believed in? I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was stalling. I didn't want to face the reality of what had been happening behind closed doors. Rachel's behavior only made it worse. She was distant in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't that she was cold, but there was a certain emptiness in her eyes, a quiet resignation that made me feel like I was losing her piece by piece. The longer I waited, the more she seemed to slip away. It was as though she was preparing for something, for the inevitable moment when I would find out the truth, and she would have to explain herself. Or, perhaps, not. But despite the growing tension, there was something else gnawing at me. Something I couldn't ignore. I had to know more. I hadn't been completely honest with myself about how far I was willing to go. After finding the letter, I couldn't stop wondering who Jason was. What kind of man would write such a letter to a married woman? How long had they been seeing each other? Was this just an affair, or was there something more, something darker at play? I knew I was crossing a line. I knew I was venturing into dangerous territory, but I couldn't help myself. One afternoon, when Rachel was out running errands, I took a deep breath and opened her laptop. I had never done this before. We had always been open with each other about our passwords, our social media accounts, everything. But this felt different. This was no longer about trust. This was about survival. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I found it almost immediately. The first thing that popped up was an email thread, buried under several other unopened messages. The subject line read, "For tonight." I clicked it open, my heart racing as the contents loaded. The emails were brief, but the tone was unmistakable. They were from Jason, the same man who had written the letter. In the messages, he talked about their plans for that evening, discussing the details of their meeting and mentioning how excited he was to see her again. But what made my stomach drop wasn't just the content. It was the way they communicated. There were no apologies, no guilt. It was as if they were speaking in a language only the two of them understood. They referred to me as if I were nothing more than a shadow in the background. "Don't worry about him," Jason wrote in one of the emails. "He'll never know. It's too easy." I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning. Every line felt like a betrayal, every word like a knife to my chest. And there was more, far more. As I sifted through the emails, I realized this wasn't just some fleeting affair. This had been going on for months, hidden in plain sight. The lies, the secrets, the deception, it was all there in front of me, undeniable. But still, I couldn't bring myself to confront Rachel. I couldn't force myself to look her in the eyes and accuse her of what I now knew to be true. There was too much at stake, too much that I wasn't ready to lose. Instead, I decided to wait. I would gather more information, piece together the puzzle she had spent months building. I would watch her, listen to her, and when the time was right, I would confront her with everything I knew. But as the days dragged on, I began to feel something inside me shift. A part of me, the part that had always been afraid of conflict, was starting to break free. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was cold, detached. I was no longer the man who had trusted her implicitly. I was the man who had uncovered the truth, and that truth was now a weight I couldn't ignore. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not anymore. I sat in the living room for what felt like hours, staring at the screen of Rachel's laptop. The emails from Jason were still open, the words blurring in front of me. My mind was racing. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal on a scale I wasn't prepared for. I had believed our life was one thing, but now, it felt like everything was a lie. As I scrolled through the messages, I found more details about their meetings, how they'd sneaked around, how they'd planned every moment to avoid detection. It wasn't the kind of affair I had imagined. There were no fleeting moments of passion or innocent flirting. It was calculated, deliberate, and it had been going on for months. I had been blind, living in a delusion of my own making. But I couldn't stop reading. One email stood out more than the others. Jason had written, "I can't keep doing this. If he finds out, it'll destroy everything. We can't go on like this, Rachel." My chest tightened. The words seemed so final, as if he was contemplating the end of whatever twisted connection they had. That was when I realized something. Jason was scared, not of me, but of losing Rachel. That's when it hit me. Their relationship wasn't just about lust. It was about control, manipulation. Rachel had been stringing him along, just as she had been stringing me along. I closed the laptop, my fingers trembling. I didn't know what to do with this newfound knowledge. Confronting her now felt like a delicate game. She had been playing me for so long, I wasn't sure if I could trust my own instincts anymore. But one thing was clear, I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Not after what I had uncovered. When Rachel came home later that evening, nothing felt the same. I watched her as she walked in, her usual smile on her face, like nothing had changed. She kissed me on the cheek, a gesture I had once found comforting, but now it felt like a performance. I felt detached, like I was watching a stranger. We made small talk over dinner. She asked how my day had gone. I gave the usual response. Fine. Busy. You know how it is. But inside, my mind was swirling. I wanted to say something, to ask her about Jason, about the lies, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to let the dam break. Instead, I kept up the facade, pretending everything was normal, pretending I was still the man who trusted her. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and there was no going back. I knew I couldn't let this go on forever. I had to act, but I didn't know how. The longer I waited, the more I began to feel like I was losing control of everything. My life, my marriage, myself. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I found myself pacing the living room. I kept thinking about the letter, about the cold words from Jason, and the fact that Rachel had been hiding this from me for so long. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know if the man I had been before could ever come back. And then it hit me. I wasn't just angry. I was terrified. Terrified of losing Rachel. Terrified of the unknown. Terrified of confronting the truth. But even more than that, I was terrified of how deep the lies had gone. Because if I confronted her now, I wasn't sure where it would lead. Would she admit it? Would she try to explain away the affair? Or would she lie her way out of it, like she had done with everything else? As the hours passed, I realized something else. I wasn't just battling Rachel's lies. I was battling my own fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the fallout. Fear of losing everything. But at some point, I knew I would have to face it. I would have to confront her, and when I did, there would be no turning back. The truth would come out, whether I was ready for it or not. The question was, what would I do when it did? The next day, everything felt different. The weight of the truth hung in the air, a constant pressure I couldn't shake. I went through the motions of my usual routine, work, errands, pretending like nothing had changed, but inside, I was unraveling. Every smile from Rachel, every casual conversation felt like a lie. It was all just a performance, a mask she wore so well I had never seen past it. That evening, after dinner, we sat on the couch together. The kids were in bed, and for the first time in weeks, there was an uncomfortable silence between us. I could feel the distance, thick and suffocating, but neither of us spoke about it. She was scrolling through her phone, absorbed in something that didn't concern me. I was lost in thought, trapped in my own mind, turning over every detail of the past few weeks. I don't know why I did it, but I found myself reaching for her phone. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was more like a reflex. Maybe I thought I could find something, some shred of evidence that would give me clarity. My hand hovered over the screen, and I hesitated. Could I do this? Could I push myself further down this dark path? The man I thought I was, the man who trusted, who loved unconditionally, was slipping away, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was starting to doubt everything. But I couldn't stop myself. I unlocked her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. There was nothing particularly unusual about it, just the usual apps, messages, and emails. Then, I clicked on one message thread. It was from Jason. I didn't need to read it. I already knew what I would find. The same tone, the same promises, the same lies. But as I scrolled further down, something caught my eye. The messages from Jason weren't just recent. They went back months. Months of hidden conversations. It was like peeling back layers of a life I hadn't known existed. There were plans for getaways, intimate rendezvous in places I never thought Rachel would visit. I couldn't help but feel a mix of nausea and disbelief as I read through the messages. We'll make it through this. He'll never find out. I sat there, staring at the screen, paralyzed. Every moment I had shared with Rachel, the vacations, the quiet nights in, the laughter, felt like a lie. I had been living in a world built on deceit, and I had been too blind to see it. Then came the final blow. Towards the end of the conversation, Jason had written, "You've done well to keep him in the dark, Rachel. But I'm starting to feel like we're getting too careless. If he ever finds out, we're both done. We need to be more careful." I felt a cold chill wash over me. Careless? They had been careless all along. But what was more disturbing was the fact that she hadn't been as secretive as I'd thought. Rachel hadn't even tried to hide it. It was as if she believed I'd never look, that I'd never question the perfect life we had built together. I put the phone down, my head spinning. I wanted to confront her then, but I couldn't. I was too far gone, too caught up in the anger and disbelief. I needed more than just messages. I needed the truth. But how would I get it? As the night wore on, I found myself lost in thought. The man I was, the man who loved his wife, who believed in their marriage, was slipping away. The truth was too overwhelming. I didn't know if I could go through with it. What would happen after the confrontation? Would I lose her? Would I be left with nothing? I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know if I even could. But as I sat there in the silence, the thought began to creep in. Maybe I didn't want to fix it. Maybe I wanted to burn it all down. The decision, the moment of reckoning, was approaching. And when I finally confronted Rachel, I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth. But I was certain of one thing. There would be no going back. I had never been the confrontational type. I'd always avoided conflict, letting things slide, hoping the discomfort would pass. But that night, as Rachel sat across from me, her phone in hand, her eyes flitting over the screen as if she hadn't just shattered my world, I knew I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The lies had been building for months, and it was time to face them, no matter how much it tore me apart. I watched her, the woman I had once trusted completely, the woman who had been my everything. But now, she seemed like a stranger. Her smile felt rehearsed, and her words lacked the warmth I remembered. I wanted to scream, to throw everything in her face, but instead, I stayed silent, watching her as she absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone. She must have sensed something because after a few minutes, she looked up. "What's going on with you?" she asked, her voice light, but with an edge that I hadn't heard in weeks. "You've been distant." I wasn't sure how to answer. The truth had been hanging on the tip of my tongue for days, but now that I was here, about to confront her, the words felt like a lead weight in my chest. My mind raced. Should I come out and say it? Should I throw her betrayal right in her face? Or should I ease into it, get her to confess on her own? I chose the latter. Slowly, deliberately, I spoke, my voice quieter than I intended. "Who's Jason?" Her face froze, and for a split second, I saw a flash of fear in her eyes. It was gone just as quickly as it came, but I saw it. I knew she heard the question for what it was. She knew exactly what I meant. "Jason." She feigned confusion, a forced laugh escaping her lips. "What are you talking about?" I didn't buy it. I didn't need to. "Don't lie to me, Rachel. I know about the messages. I know about the affair." Her expression shifted then. She didn't panic, but something about her demeanor hardened, almost like she had been expecting this moment. Her eyes narrowed, and she put her phone down with deliberate slowness. "What do you want me to say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, I was taken aback. I had expected more denial, more excuses, but instead, there was this strange acceptance in her tone. It was like she had resigned herself to the inevitable, like she knew this day was coming. I felt a mix of anger and hurt rush through me. "I want you to tell me the truth. I want you to tell me everything." Rachel sighed, running a hand through her hair. There was a moment of silence as she stared at her lap. Then, slowly, she spoke, her voice shaky, as if the words were hard to get out. "I never meant for it to go this far." I clenched my fists, my knuckles white. I wanted to yell, to ask how it had happened, how she could betray me like this, but I stayed still, waiting for her to continue. "I never planned to fall for him," she said, her voice almost apologetic. "It just happened. We started talking, and things escalated. She paused, as if choosing her next words carefully. It wasn't about you, not at first. I never wanted to hurt you. I couldn't stop the bitterness that crept into my voice. Then why? Why did you do it? Rachel's eyes flickered to the floor. I don't know. I guess I felt like something was missing. And then Jason came along, and he made me feel seen, I suppose. Her voice was low, almost embarrassed. I've been lying to you for months, and I hate myself for it. But I didn't know how to stop. Her confession hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't the affair that hurt the most. It was the fact that she felt like something was missing with me. I thought I had been doing everything right. I had been there for her, for our family. And yet, in her eyes, I had somehow become invisible. I felt my world cracking open, but instead of falling apart, something else took hold. Anger. Cold, bitter rage. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, had chosen to betray me. She had found solace in someone else's arms and had been lying to me for months about it. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize her. This wasn't the woman I had built a life with. This was a stranger who had worn a mask for far too long. How could you, Rachel? I whispered, the pain in my voice cutting deeper than any words could. Rachel's face softened, guilt flooding her expression. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, she said quietly. I never thought it would go this far. Her apology felt hollow, like it was too little, too late. The damage had already been done. I wanted to scream, to accuse her of ruining everything, but I held back. There was nothing more to say, not yet. Instead, I stood up, the weight of the conversation hanging between us like a thick fog. I don't know who you are anymore, I muttered, turning away. The words stung, but they were the truth. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, had disappeared behind a veil of lies. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But one thing was certain, I couldn't stay in this relationship, not like this. Not with everything I now knew. The truth had torn everything apart, and there was no going back. As I left the room, Rachel didn't stop me. She didn't say another word. And in that silence, I realized that the woman I had once called my wife had made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. The days that followed were strange. There was a suffocating silence between Rachel and me, a wall that neither of us dared to break. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes after a fight, where there's still a flicker of hope that things can be patched up. No, this was different. It was the kind of silence that speaks volumes. The kind of silence that tells you everything has changed and nothing will ever be the same. I went to work, tried to focus on my tasks, but my mind was consumed by what had happened. The images of Rachel and Jason, their secret world that I had been oblivious to, haunted me at every turn. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. The worst part wasn't even the affair. It was how easily Rachel had lied to me, how effortlessly she had slipped into this other life without a second thought. I had been so sure of us, so certain that we had built something real. But now, all I saw were cracks in everything we had built, and I couldn't unsee them. She tried to talk to me a few times, to apologize, but each time, the words felt empty. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it didn't change anything. What she had done wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple apology. I needed more than that. I needed to know why. Why her? Why him? Why me? One night, after the kids were asleep, Rachel sat across from me in the dimly lit kitchen. Her hands trembled as she picked at the edge of her napkin, avoiding my gaze. She was still the same woman I had married, but she was also a stranger now. Someone I didn't know, someone I couldn't trust. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she began, her voice soft. About how you don't know who I am anymore. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I had already made up my mind about her, about what this was now. But I couldn't bring myself to leave yet. Something held me there, whether it was the years we had spent together or the simple fact that I didn't know what else to do. I never wanted to hurt you, David. I swear, she continued, her voice cracking with emotion. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling seen. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I felt like you didn't need me anymore. And then Jason, he was there, and he made me feel like I mattered. Her words cut through me, but not in the way I had expected. I had thought I would be angry, consumed with rage, but what I felt instead was a deep, hollow emptiness. She had been lonely. She had felt unseen, and that was enough to lead her into the arms of another man. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but I held it in. The truth was, I was tired. Tired of the lies, tired of the deception, tired of trying to piece together a marriage that had already crumbled. "I've been so stupid, David," she whispered. "I've ruined everything. I don't know if I can fix it, but I want to try. I'll do whatever it takes." But her words didn't reach me. They felt hollow, like they were meant to ease her own guilt more than to fix what had been broken. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever believe that this wasn't just a phase for her, a selfish escape from the life we had built? I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore, and the thought of going back to the way things were felt impossible. I stood up and walked toward the door, needing space, needing air. Rachel didn't try to stop me. She knew. She knew that the damage had been done, that the trust had been shattered beyond repair. The next few days were a blur of forced conversations, empty apologies, and the slow realization that something irreversible had happened. Our marriage, our family, everything I thought I knew. It was all slipping through my fingers. And no amount of apologies, no amount of time, could change the fact that what was broken might never be fixed. I thought about leaving, about walking away from it all. But then I thought about the kids. What would this do to them? What would this do to me? How could I ever move on from this? For now, I stayed. But it wasn't the same. It would never be the same again. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know who I was anymore. The silence between Rachel and me grew unbearable. Every conversation felt like a facade. We spoke only when necessary, like two strangers who were simply sharing the same space. The love, the connection, it had all evaporated. It wasn't just the affair, it was the realization that I didn't know who I had been living with all these years. Who had I married? Was it a lie from the beginning? I tried to focus on the kids, on keeping the routine steady for their sake. But inside, I was unraveling. I started staying late at work, not because I had to, but because I couldn't face the emptiness at home. Every time I walked through the door, I could feel the weight of what was unsaid, like a thick fog that clouded the air. Rachel seemed to sense it too, but neither of us dared to speak the truth that hung between us. One evening, a few days after our last conversation, Rachel came to me. I hadn't expected it. She had kept her distance, as had I. But this time, there was something different about her. Her face was flushed, her eyes red. She had been crying. I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I had no idea where we stood anymore. "I don't know what's worse, David," she continued. "The affair or the fact that I've lost you. That I've lost us." I stared at her, unable to speak. The truth was, I had already lost her. I didn't know when it happened, or how, but the connection we once had was gone. She had thrown it all away, and I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. "Maybe we were never meant to be," she whispered, her words barely audible. "Maybe I was wrong all along." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. My anger, my hurt, they were all simmering beneath the surface, but I had to keep it together. For the kids, for myself. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Rachel," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "And I don't know if we can ever go back." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I don't want to go back, David. I just want a chance to fix this. To fix me. To fix us." But I couldn't bring myself to believe her anymore. Every word she spoke now felt like another layer of manipulation, another attempt to hide the truth of what she had done. How could I trust someone who had broken everything between us? "I don't know if there's anything left to fix," I said, the words heavy in the air. "I don't think there's a way back from this." Rachel looked away, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But her apologies didn't mean anything anymore. The damage was done. The trust had been shattered, and I couldn't see how it could ever be repaired. I wasn't sure if I even wanted it to be repaired. As she stood there, wiping away her tears, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. It wasn't peace, not by any means, but it was a realization. I had spent so long trying to salvage something that was already broken. Maybe it was time to let go. "I think we both know what needs to happen next," I said, my voice steady. I couldn't look at her anymore. I had to face the truth that we were done, that this marriage was over. She didn't respond, just stood there, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it quickly faded. The truth was, I didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't know if I even wanted to. As I walked away, leaving her standing there, I knew that I was stepping into unknown territory. But in that moment, I also realized that the unknown was better than living in a lie. The choice had been made. There was no going back. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. Rachel and I had separated. The house felt emptier without her, and the silence was deafening. But as much as I hated it, I knew it was the only way forward. I moved into a small apartment downtown, keeping things civil for the kids. They didn't deserve to feel the weight of our mistakes, so I kept the drama away from them as much as possible. But inside, something had shifted. I began to rediscover who I was without Rachel. I started working out again, something I hadn't done in years. I picked up old hobbies, things I had pushed aside in the name of family life. Slowly, I felt the fog lifting. I was becoming someone I hadn't seen in a long time, a person who had hopes, dreams, and a future ahead of him. I realized that life could still be fulfilling, even without the woman I thought I would grow old with. One day, after a particularly long week at work, I received a message from a lawyer. It was about the divorce proceedings, but the document contained more than just legal jargon. It was a list of assets we had to divide, and it also mentioned something I wasn't expecting. Rachel had been hiding money. A lot of money. I felt a sense of cold satisfaction as I read the details. Rachel had opened a secret bank account in her name alone, funneling money into it from our joint accounts over the last few months. It was clear she had been preparing for this moment. She had made sure she would come out on top, even if it meant betraying me in the worst way possible. But karma has a way of balancing things out, even when you least expect it. I didn't take it to the lawyers right away. Instead, I made a decision. I would confront Rachel, but not in the way she expected. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, not just to me, but to herself. A week later, I called her. I had been avoiding her calls for days, but now I needed to speak to her directly. She answered on the second ring, her voice tentative, like she wasn't sure what to expect. "What do you want, David?" she asked. "I think we need to talk," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "In person." She agreed, and we met at the same park where we had shared so many peaceful afternoons in the past. It felt surreal, standing there again, knowing how much had changed between us. When she arrived, she looked almost the same, her face a little more worn, the weight of our separation showing in the way she carried herself. But there was still a glimmer of defiance in her eyes. "I know what you're going to say," she started, her tone defensive. "I know it's over. I know I messed up." I looked at her, letting her words hang in the air for a moment before speaking. "You don't know the half of it, Rachel." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table toward her. She looked at it, her face going pale as she opened it and scanned the contents. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's your secret account," I said quietly. "The one you've been siphoning money into. The one you thought I wouldn't find." Her face went from confusion to disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. "You've been hiding this from me," I continued, "just like you hid everything else. I know about the money, Rachel, and I know why you've been doing it." I watched her reaction carefully. For a moment, she looked like she might crumble, but then she regained her composure. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to lose everything." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Well, you did. You lost everything. And now, you have to live with the consequences." I watched her closely, the reality of what she had done slowly sinking in. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about her calculated plan to take what was mine, to leave me with nothing while she secured her own future. But now, the tables had turned. She had underestimated me. "Rachel," I said, my voice firm, "I'm taking everything I'm entitled to. The house, the savings, the investments, and I'm making sure you pay for every lie you've told." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "You're going to feel the consequences of your actions, Rachel. You're going to lose just like I did. You don't get to walk away clean. Not this time." And with that, I walked away. I didn't need to hear her excuses or justifications anymore. She had made her choices, and now she would face the fallout. As I drove home that evening, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I had done what was necessary. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. Rachel's fate was sealed, and while I wasn't looking for revenge, It was clear she would pay for the lies and the deceit. I knew she would have to rebuild from the wreckage of her own making. For me, though, the future was open. I had the freedom to start again, to rebuild my life on my terms. It wasn't going to be easy, but it would be mine. And that, in the end, was all I needed. I had been broken once, but now I was free.